I'd like to call the meeting to order. All right. Introductions of members and public attending the meeting. Do you want to go ahead and do?
Yeah, we might as well go ahead and introduce everybody since there's so few of us here.
Cool.
I can start. I'm Wendy Ford, the staff liaison to the Public Art Advisory Committee.
Julie Seidel Johnson, Director of Parks and Recreation, and have been on this committee for 6 years, I think.
Dominic Donjoli, at-large member for two years, I think.
That sounds right.
I started in 2020.
Andrea Truitt, I'm also an at-large member, and this is my 4th year on the committee.
Ron Kanucky, Public Works Director, 7 years.
And then since you guys aren't mic'd up, I'll just make a note for the minutes that Dawson Davenport is with us. He'll be presenting his artwork concept for the Black Hawk Mini Park later in the agenda. And then also Redmond Jones, who is our new, not even new anymore, it's been a year, for goodness sakes, Deputy City Manager. So welcome, Redmond and Dawson.
Welcome.
Public discussion of any item not on the agenda. Sounds like a no. Or it seems like a no from who's here. All right. Consideration of last month's meeting minutes.
I'll move approval of the June 2nd, 2022 meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, now I have a question and sort of a point of order thing. I wonder if, since Dawson is here, if we would like to move his agenda item up next so he wouldn't have to wait through these 2 other items. Is that,
That's fine.
think that sounds good?
Works for me.
Okay, well, let's move on to agenda item 7. And Dawson, how about, let's see, I think this mic is on over here. If you'd like to talk here, and I can project the image that you sent a little bit ago, so there you go.
All right, thank you. And thank you all for your time and consideration for this project. It's really been an honor. You know, as an artist, I like to do research on what I'm working on, especially if somebody's given me, you know, time and something like as big as this. I wanted to really give you a great piece of art, not just something thrown together, but I want you to know that I really invested my time researching Black Hawk, researching the mini park and its conception and how long it's been around for and what the intent and the idea was behind the original idea of Black Hawk and the Black Hawk mini park. And so I kept a working document of the time I put in, books and resources I've researched, and the time I put in as far as doing artwork and what I came up with, you know, and meeting with, you know, Anita and Wendy and all that good stuff, getting this idea and concept out. So it's really a little different than doing murals, obviously, or doing some other thing. I want it to be different. I wanted it to be something that would truly stand out and, you know, get the idea across of, you know, who Black Hawk was, what he stood for. And it kind of coincides with the creation of the Black Hawk Mini Park and what they wanted to originally do with the space. You know, just having it be kind of what it is now. You know, they talked about planters and having a space for growing things, and you know, I know there was a lot of you know, pulling this way and doing away with it, and you know, all of that kind of coincides with Black Hawk's journey and being resilient about his community and being you know, very well community oriented. So, you know, that's kind of what I took away from both, you know, both of these things. They kind of went together. So I came, originally I wanted to do like facts and just kind of make like a kind of a plaque with all the facts and stuff on there, but that kind of seemed, it'd have been a lot, and there's a lot more to both stories than just, trying to put it all down into a couple sentences so it will fit on this piece of artwork. So I was thinking I do a lot of poetry things for the community and everything, and I mean, it's what I do anyway, so I might as well just come up with a poem. And so instead of putting all the facts and everything in there, I came up with this poem, and it's about kind of wrote a little description down there about a garden. It's that time of year where we should be planting and gardening, and I'm a big advocate of that, growing your own food and everything. So, you think about a garden, you think about the resiliency and the community and all of that. So it all kind of ties in with what I wanted to do with this project and this poem. And so as you can see, I combined all of these elements. I combined the mural that was there before. I threw a little bit of, I left some pieces off of here. It didn't show up apparently, but
Those would be the birds.
yeah, there's
Yeah, I remember
a
those
sequence
from
of
before.
birds flying across, black hawks, obviously. And also, I had a little bit of technical difficulties the other day. I almost had this complete and finished, and then the computer froze up, and I don't know. So I tried to get as much done as I could today, redo everything. The two toughest parts are last, but it's not impossible. I can finish it either today or tomorrow. And that's just adding more color, adding more in-depth details to this artwork. And what you see is simply a home, a traditional home of the Sagi people and also the Meskwaki people. Black Hawk was a Sagi, so he was a different tribe than Meskwaki people, but we were so closely related, so closely the way we lived and dressed and spoke and everything were very close that the government thought we were kind of the same people, and hence the government name we were given, the Sac and Fox of the Mississippi. And so there have always been tied to us throughout our migration to Iowa. And so that's what that home is, and anybody who knows my art and my art style will kind of know that this is my work, because I've used that image in a lot of my paintings and a lot of graphic design work I did. And same with the when I start adding it back into colors, it's kind of along the style that I have of painting and doing my graphics. So people will know that this is a Dawson Davenport piece. Also, I put in there on the side this applique floral style of art, which is known by woodland people. And Meskwakis use it, but we have our own kind of distinct style. So I just tried to research like what Sagis and how their style of applique design was, and this is kind of the way that I seen it. And so it's again a different tribe, but they're very similar. So if you were somebody were to see these designs, they could probably say that comes from either a Sagi or a Meskwaki person. And so yeah, that's kind of pretty much what I got. Again, there's a series of Black Hawks flying through there, which if you look at the old mural that was painted on there, you can kind of see, and when I add the colors back in there, it'll reflect all of that. Yeah, and that's pretty much what I've got so far.
Can you talk a little more about the colors or additional detail, like what, it's hard to see what is missing, so maybe if you could talk about what you would plan to add.
So inside this, in the old mural, there was a kind of like a color scheme. It was brown, yellow, orangish, like a different kind of colors, and that's kind of how I've always messed around with like a idea of a sunset or something. And so that's what I'm gonna put along inside these, and then over the top I'm not sure why I must have not have clicked the button on that thing, but and there'll be Black Hawks going across that. yellow is what soggy means. So Meskwaki means red earth, our people of the red earth. So Soggy Huck means people of the yellow earth, and that's why I use a lot of yellows in the painting or in the picture. And it kind of cool because Iowa's black and yellow. You can play with the black and yellow from this, and so yeah, that was kind of made it fun and kind of cool. It all kind of ties into the area, so I thought that would be kind of, in this picture, it's a little different than what I had originally done. I kind of just, because I have my own style of putting clouds and things like that. So that'll be a little different in the final draft. And then, yeah, it's a fun project. I really enjoy doing it. I really enjoy kind of the researching. I'm kind of a history guy, so doing all of that reading and everything was pretty beneficial for me because now I know so much about Black Hawk. But yeah.
Good, thanks. Does anybody have any questions for Dawson?
Will the figure of Black Hawk remain a line drawing, or
No.
you're going to add color into
Yeah,
that too?
yeah. I just this is what I started out with in my rough draft, and it's just kind of a placement holder and like I said, that was kind of the harder part to have to recreate was a Black Hawk because of all the detail and the different color and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I put my Meskwaki name on there because throughout time, I think it'll be important for people to understand that this was done by a native person, an indigenous person, and someone who, contributes to this community, and is going to with everything else that I got going on here in town. So, yeah.
Welcome,
I mean,
Anita. Let's see, so this is a more refined concept, the concept of which I believe we approved last time. So we, in the interim, Anita and I had met with Dawson to talk about the completion of the project, specifically if he preferred to build the stand and weld the pieces that would hold the plaque itself together. Just because we know you're so busy, you've got an artist in residence project coming up in the fall. I did some research, but don't have prices yet, but it looks as though if we ordered the sign stand into which this plaque was placed, then it would probably be around a $3,000 stand, including getting the art into it, which would only leave $2,000 for the art. And while this may seem a little awkward at this point, it's been sort of awkward all along with this project. Dawson, how do you feel about having a reduced fee for the art, which would also reduce the amount of work that you needed to complete in that, if I can ask that?
I mean, yeah, it does help me out as far as everything I got going on to be able to just give it to you and have you guys do it.
I spoke with ASI, a local, well, they're actually a national, I think, sign manufacturer, but with the local presence here. And they had indicated, I had asked about the best way to get this colored art onto an interpretive stand. And they suggested something called iZone, which I want to show you as well. They did these plaques over in Coralville that have been in place for some time, and you can see a little bit of the wear, actually, that is on them. But they also built the stands into which the plaque explaining the mill in this case fit. And what it is it's an integrated, the image is integrated into a plastic and then placed into a steel frame. And in this case, that steel frame has kind of a stylish foot to it, but it could also be more plain than that. I'm waiting for prices on that, but I guess to get a comfort level from Dawson would be good with that kind of process, and also from the committee would be good. So yours to discuss a little bit.
And I think it's not as big as that. It's I think roughly about 15 inches.
Yeah, the foot of it would be shorter for sure, because we'd want to have it visible by a small child in a wheelchair in the ped mall there, in that planter.
So it wouldn't be as big as that, but
And it wouldn't even have space really to be very decorative.
Yeah. Yeah.
My hope would be that the art and the fabrication would be at least an equal split. You know, right now they seem a little bit disproportionate, and I know you don't have the actual prices yet, but you know, I think it's, you know, I hate to see the art undervalued
Yeah.
or negated. So I would, you know, that's what I would appreciate. I don't know if there's room in the budget or, you know, to sort of bring that back to what we'd like that to be.
There isn't room in this budget, but you may have noticed in the budget report, I included that we are carrying over and will be spending into the next fiscal year on this project. We have not budgeted specifics for that fiscal year yet. One option would be to add $1,000 to that line. And this just feels so awkward with the artist sitting here and with us in this conversation. But if the total budget were $6,000, for example, then, and the sign, building, manufacturing the sign was $3,000, then there could be $3,000 for the artist as well. That would have to be something we would discuss in a budget discussion, and while we've got some background to discuss on that later here, we aren't planning on discussing that budget until next month.
So I have a question for Dawson. So how integral is the base and the design of the base to your concept for the entire piece? I mean, is it something different that you're thinking that needs to be a part of it to make the whole piece one, or is it?
No.
No, okay.
No. It's considering that it's going to be fairly short, and you know, I was kind of mindful too of like there's going to be stuff growing there and all of that good stuff. So I didn't want to get. We talked about it getting kind of a little bit more elaborate and stuff, and again, maybe down the road if you know, you want to revisit that and you know, technology and things change, maybe there is something we could do to modify it to bring it more life or whatever. You know, that's always an option.
So going with a more standard base isn't a problem for the overall
no.
concept as far as you're concerned?
No, yeah, the main thing is what's on here.
What's on the top?
And I also wanted to, I forgot to mention too, in the artwork, we're going to be putting in a QR code thing so that you can get more information on Black Hawk and maybe the history of, because I found a lot of cool things about how it came to be, and I think that's kind of getting lost too, is, you know, the vision of what Black Hawk Mini Park was set to be. It's kind of cool that it's still going and, you know, trying to keep that alive, so.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This doesn't provide a helpful answer to your question, Wendy, but I just wanted to say thank you for your design. And I think that was one of my first meetings, was when you had originally proposed a public art matching grant for Black Hawk Mini Park. And so I'm excited to see this come into fruition. And I think it also is just very Iowa City public art the history of this space, and so I'm excited about this project.
I had a question in terms of the lifespan of the plastic piece, because clearly there's wear and tear, but I'm also not a super long-term, resident of the area. So, have these been around 20 years, 10 years? I'm just trying to think through what the life of the object as well would
Ron may
be.
have a better answer, but I'm going to say about 15 to 20 years on a well-made
Okay.
sign. The one that we've have them at Ashton House. I know that in Corville they have it by Northridge Pavilion. They have them by the river. So there are several around in the area, and they're actually most of them are holding up pretty well.
I think the one that's pictured here, I think, is probably in the 15-year range. I think that's about the time when Coralville did their renovation on that side of the Iowa River Power Dam.
Okay.
So these are right at the Iowa River Power Company. In that parking lot is where these are
Okay.
at.
It also seems like there might be options that Dawson should be involved in regarding the final commitment of the stand. And I know you're very particular about the height. That's something you definitely care about. You mentioned that a lot, because you do want it even better than just ADA. You want it really accessible to children,
Everybody.
and so.
And I'm sure ASI, if they were to manufacture it, would take the recommendations of the artist and build what you wanted, what you thought went with that
Okay.
as well. And Anita, when you talk about options, are you talking about how the image is fabricated into the plaque?
Yeah, and even the stand, I mean, here you have, like you said, like it's, this has a specific look. I'm sure there's options, like, with the
Those
stand,
options.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that seems like something that Dawson should definitely have an eye on and a voice to talk
Yeah.
to them about.
Yeah.
So what it's sounding like to me is that we're maybe ready to really approve the design as it's presented. Everyone seems to be really happy with this concept, and then but hold off until we have an actual price on the mounting of it or the structure it goes on, and revisit budget and whatnot when that happens. Does that sound like a?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, and I think once everything gets proved and finalized, it shouldn't be it should be able pretty easy to kind of put in. I mean,
Yeah, I know that most of these signs take about 8 to 12 weeks for them to manufacture and install generally. So.
yeah, yeah.
Can we?
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I know last meeting we had talked about the partial. Was it
Yes.
that?
That's what I was going to bring up.
Okay, moving forward with like that.
Yeah, after the initial concept, we had, the draft of a contract that we would have with Dawson was to include one-third payment, or $1,667, I think it was, upon approval of the concept. And we still need to do an agreement, and I think we could still use that figure at this point for the first payment, and then over the next month, as we get prices, we would, and discuss our final budget, we could
Work out the rest.
work out the rest of it from there. But we would want to get an agreement so that it was fair to you, and so that we would start paying you for this great work that you've done. Want to get that going very, very shortly here.
Okay.
And you should let us know what that is. What is fair for your compensation?
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of a good time to think about that.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds about right so far, from what I've done. And again, I put in, I don't know right off the top of my head, but significant amount of time so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think around that price would be good for this to start. And like I said, I got to finish it, and that shouldn't be too hard. But
Good, good. Well, let's we'll continue talking this month about the base, about the numbers, and then next month we'll have our budget discussions exactly, but we'll get going with that contract right away.
Okay. Yeah.
For you.
And I still got the other one somewhere around here.
Sorry?
but I still got the other one somewhere.
Okay, and we'll have to modify that
Okay.
depending on, I guess, prices and everything in the end. But I'll work on that. We'll work together. I'll show it to you and make sure you're
Okay.
all on board with everything, of course.
Sounds good.
So, good. We missing anything then?
Do we need to vote?
Need a motion to say we approve the design or the,
Yeah, that would be helpful. I think approve the design and the initial payment for the artwork.
Okay. Can those be one motion, or do they need to be two separate? Okay. I will motion to approve the concept presented by Dawson Davenport, pending his additional additions of color, and also to move forward with the initial payment as outlined in the contract.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Dawson, thank you so much for coming. And I'll be in touch. Well, as soon as I get some numbers, maybe you and Anita and I can meet again.
Sure.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. Okay. All right, let's see.
So it looks like we're on number 5,
Mm-hmm.
Sculpture Showcase Alternative Selections.
Yeah, and in your packet, I put this, the same spreadsheet that we had looked at last time. And I've got them in front of you again. You can see the scores at the bottom of the sheet where and the ones that were outlined in black were the ones that were initially selected. However, Loom, the one with the gray, is not now available to go into Scott Park. So looking at the scores in order of who would be next, Towards Equilibrium had a score of 10, River 11, Fault Plain 12. Number 10 is the one that is A, from New Jersey, and 2 has a caveat that people must not touch it. Yet it is 1 foot by 3 feet by 5 feet, so very in the touchable range. And River, the next one, with 11 points, is similar to some of the others where it's a tall core 10 steel type of figure. So we should probably have done this the day we made the selection of the first 8, is choose a first alternate and perhaps even a second alternate if one of the others falls through between now and when they go up.
Well, I feel like we expressed concerns last month with the Towards Equilibrium. And once again, I feel like we would have the same caveats and concerns. So that just, it feels too risky, both for the artist's wishes, but then also I feel like having a larger, I don't know, it's coming from a long way. There's I don't know, you're not supposed to touch it, but it's very touchable. It just doesn't feel good for like the city of Iowa City on that front or the artist. You know, I wouldn't want anything to happen to his artwork outside of the, inside of his own region, let alone in a totally different region. It feels too,
I agree. I think, to ensure it's not touched, there would have to be some kind of a barricade, And that's not the message that you would want for public art. It's, you know, and I think river and fault plain are very nice. So I would definitely advocate for those to be the alternatives, because I do think that you know, this is an outdoor space that's going to be touched, and that they're not going to be able to maintain that patina. So.
I agree. I would say those river and fault plains should be our first and second alternates. But with the change, I would also recommend that the polychrome sculpture move to Scott Park and the replacement one go to Riverfront Crossings. It's a bigger space at Scott Park, and I think we need something larger and more colorful there. Whereas the other one those two other options would seem to fit with what we already have at Riverfront, or what we've already chosen for Riverfront Crossings.
Is that a motion?
That's the motion. I move what I just said.
Okay.
There's a second.
I second that. Sounds good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Great.
Right.
They will be pleased to know that.
All right. The request for qualifications for the artist mentor for the South District Neighborhood Association bench project.
Eleanor Levin had a chance to read through this. Sorry, don't watch as I scroll through this real quickly. Oh, there it is. And I'm not sure if you did either, if you had a chance. And by the way, let me first apologize for getting this packet out like 5 minutes before the deadline. I had actually been hoping that Dawson's final artwork would be ready for it, but that's when his computer crashed, and that's why it was late, basically. But this is the project where we would select an artist mentor who would then help us and the South District Neighborhood Association select an emerging artist to design and build a bench for the bus stop that is out on Hines Road near the entry to the Saddlebrook area neighborhood. Eleanor thought this request for proposals looked appropriate and like everything they were expecting. It specifies that the artist mentor would receive $1,500 for their part in helping an emerging artist design, select materials, build, and install a bus stop bench at this location. There was one piece in here, one paragraph in here that indicated a project expense that must be included in the total $12,000 budget was the installation of a concrete pad at the site. So I checked with Transit, who will have funds for putting bus stop pads in, but does not have access to those monies yet. And then I talked to Ron, who seems to think we might be able to work something out as far as a design and getting a pad poured, sort of not offline, what was the word you used? One-off from the transit program.
I mean, if the money's, if they have monies available, if it's in the operating budget, it's available now. If it's in the capital program, it'll be available January 1. So either way, there should be money available, and if we need to, accelerate the project, or even if we have to have our own staff do the installation as far as street staff or transit staff, I think we can make that happen. Especially, and the time frame that we have, right, is installation by June of next year.
Yeah.
So, we're a year out yet from that, so I'm pretty certain that we can have that bus stop pad in place for the installation prior to that point.
And would not have to use funds from this budgeted item for that.
Correct. I believe, the bus stop upgrades is already a part of their operational plan. So, whether it's through their budget or there again through a, sidewalk upgrade, whatever we need to do, I'm sure we can make that happen.
Okay, so I'm just gonna, I think what I'll do is just take out this bit that talks about that expense needing to be part of the budget for this project.
That's really great, because that was a concern for me, because that has to be built, in such a specific way, and how does an artist anticipate the cost and meet those? And so it just seems like it's great that the city's taking care of that.
Good. Okay, so I think what we need to do is with that change, get an approval of this request for qualifications.
I just had one thing. With paragraph 2 of, I think intuitively, when it says, a minimum of 3 years and the artist will be responsible for maintenance, I think intuitively that does mean emerging artists, but just clarifying that up a little bit.
And maybe we should state that it would be either like regular or expected maintenance. I would, if it gets graffitied, I think that would be us that would have to clean that off, would be my thought. The city would have to, if it's, or say fireworks were lit off and melted part of it. I don't think that would be the artist's, should be their responsibility. It would be, if the materials they use or the joints they put together fail during those 3 years, they have to fix that. If it's because of unusual wear or tear or a tornado or something like that,
Yeah.
it should be the city, if that's.
Okay. I can clarify that.
Yeah.
I do wonder if that compensation is enough. I mean, because looking at the 1,500, I mean, that's, like, is that like 50 hours of work or 60 hours of work? What's the time, how does that equal time that we're asking for this, from one artist to give to another? So that's kind of a, and how much time would that take? And I don't have any idea.
I mean, and I genuinely think that's a really great question, because then I think there are, depending on who would be chosen, if there is an assumed emotional labor based on gender. But yeah, to try to at least give a ballpark figure somehow, if there is a way. I mean, again, there is sort of no way, but at the same time of having, if there is a way to kind of put some sort of loose boundary or just kind of an approximation, I don't know.
Time, like the time expectation.
Because, I mean, if I were an artist and like, well, this might be, I don't know, 30, 40 hours over the course of a year, well, okay. But if it sort of ends up
Gonna be
being
more.
right, so, and again, I have,
Because it's you're mentoring, and that takes time.
What would be the best way to how could we fix that? I mean, knowing we have a $12,000 budget for the thing.
Well, given now that we have the cement pad paid for, could we make that 2,000? Like, could we take some of that, make it a little bit more robust, so that someone's going to be willing to invest that time, and do put, some sort of a.
We could do that and then reduce the
Right.
the artist fee to no
the
more than
10,000.
10,000.
Right. It just seems like that's just a little more realistic.
I mean, as it stands, 1,500 is like, if that's $30 an hour, that's 50 hours of. So I mean, I guess maybe it might be helpful to think about how many hours we expect and over what period of time they need to be available.
Well,
You know, if it's something like approximately 50 hours over throughout like the project schedule with the hope that they have a check-in with the artist like once a month. Yeah, like just a statement like that. If
I think that's really good to let people know the time expectation.
well, if the artist is selected, and the mentor would be helping in that part too, so I guess the mentor's help would actually begin in probably October, realistically, but then ramp up and be done by June. What's that, about 8 months of a project going on?
But you have the artist mentor assisting with the RFQ, right? So they're actually starting in August with their work.
True, although I don't think that will involve all that much work, since we have kind of a boilerplate, and it'll be, I would think that part would be fairly simple. Where it gets intense is when they're, at least this is how I'm imagining it, where they would be helping with the selection of materials, the actual engineering of the bench design. I'm not saying, Ron, that it wouldn't be very involved, but
Do we have a model of this from another community?
so it makes it kind of difficult.
So it almost seems like we would need to reverse engineer a little bit with, if we have installation completed in June, then, you know, would we assume that, you know, maybe March, April, May would be heavier months in terms of constructing and then installing? I don't know. Anita, how would you sort of reverse engineer that schedule to see, oh, well, okay, if it's that, then this many hours this month, then, oh,
Right.
it's, you know, 5 at the beginning or whatever. But what would that maybe,
Well, it's definitely going to be heavier in the planning stages.
I mean,
For the
if you
artist.
if you look at the RFQ, there's five basically steps that they're going to participate in, right? So there's getting the public input, selecting the appropriate materials, fabricating the design, installing the bench, instructing the artist on maintenance. So, I mean, if you could put some numbers to those 5 items, roughly, you would have what the mentor artist would be, you know, what we would think their commitment would be to that.
And so if it was 2,000, how many hours is that?
Depends on what their time's worth.
I mean, it would sort of be like 100 hours at $20, you know, an hour or something.
Say 30? Because this is, I mean, for people who do this kind of work, they make good money.
No,
No, absolutely, yeah.
if it's 30, it would be like 65 hours, approximately.
And so I just think we should include that with just saying that for the artist. That seems like a reasonable amount of time of.
No, actually, I was trying to just do a rough sketch of how that would work out, and I've got it at like at 65, like the idea of 10 hours for public input, 20 for selection of materials / 20 for fabricating, install 10 depending, and then like 5 hours with like instructing on maintenance. So that would be 65. Does that seem?
Yeah, I think that does seem pretty reasonable. It's really going to be talking about the ideas, you know, mentoring that of what is functional and also aesthetic. But yeah. And, you know, hopefully, I mean, this artist is you know, these are 2 artists already, just one has not stepped out into the public art forum, you know.
That sounds like a great suggestion. I'd love to make a copy of that or take a picture of it.
Yep.
Okay, so if we add the details, oh, thanks, well done here.
I think we
If we add,
I think we need to be careful though, right? Because
Yeah.
it's still a lump sum contract, right? So, I
Right,
mean,
for a contractor, yeah.
as many hours or as few hours as they put in, they're still getting that final dollar amount. So I think we the language probably needs to say, we estimate
Yes.
65
Yeah.
hours.
Estimating
You know.
minimum
and-
of 65
I
hours.
Well, that will help them understand the
understand what
expectations.
what their expectation is, but also have the wiggle language in there such that they understand that if they spend 150 hours, there's not an expectation that we would have a change order with them to pay, compensate them for that
Sure.
additional hours. Just as if they only spend 60 hours, we're not going to ask them for 5 hours back.
So in order to get this out the door, would you be okay approving it with these changes and working with the South District Neighborhood Association to promote it and get that part going?
Will you add, or I guess, do we think it necessary to add like a reasonable expectation of availability over the course of the project timeline? Like, so that they're like, I'm going to do all of the work in the month of August and then like disappear type of a thing.
I think that's really good because if the artist chosen to be the mentor already has a mentoring role with it, that will be obvious information. But what if it is an artist who is who could be a really good mentor, but just kind of needs a little bit of like, FYI, just a statement, FYI, that might be new to mentoring, but might be great at it. And hopefully will be if it's an artist new to mentoring.
Okay, so it would be, I motion to increase the compensation for the mentor to $2,000, given that we no longer have to budget for the concrete pad, making compensation for the producing/designing artist $10,000, in addition to the changes to expectations as outlined in the RFQ, and approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that.
Wendy, I love the way you've put it as FY23 budget approach. We're going to prepare for
Yeah.
FY23.
Yeah, well, and I wanted to make sure that Steve was here too, but I just wanted to put some information in front of you that may help, it may not, but that was the results of the surveys that were taken, one in 2018 and another in 2021. I thought, even though it's really a little bit like looking at apples and oranges, I thought it might be helpful just as a review to see how people answered questions of what type of art they like to see and where they like to see it, as kind of a precursor to really buckling down on the budget next month. And so I don't know if you can come up with a super quantitative answer to, this is where we need public art, or this is what kind of public art we need, but I put it out there as food for thought. And if you haven't had a chance to look at it, keep it around. I don't know if we need to digest it all here, because it's really just that, food for thought. What was very helpful in putting this together was our interns having put this Google map together of all the public art in Iowa City that she knew of, or that we had done, or that our matching grant program had done, or that private entities had done, such as the Ben Summerwell mural on the back of the Midwest One Bank. We didn't have anything to do with that, but it's public art, it's out there, it's a mural, it's downtown. It is part of the results that you have in front of you here. So I think one of the things that I've noticed as I've taken on the liaison here to the Public Art Advisory Committee is that we have a really, really pretty small budget, but we have pretty small projects as well, which means there is a lot of work to get these pretty small projects done. And I thought one way to illustrate that would be to show you the budget standing where we are now. Also in your packet, each year, city staff is asked to make a request for carrying over unspent portions of the budget, and that's what this table was for. It shows this year our sculpture showcase where we've what we've budgeted, what we've paid out to date, and what we haven't paid out to date, because in the case, for example, of our sculpture showcase, artists won't get their final payment of $500 until after they deinstall or take away those sculptures, which makes for kind of a hard year to wrap up. But nonetheless, that's where we are. We need to ask for carryover of sculpture showcase funds. Some of our matching grant programs will not be completed, were not completed in FY22, so we're asking to have those carried over. And then likewise down here under our larger projects, we have the Blackhawk Mini Park project that needs to be carried over, the South District bench project we just talked about. This past year, we had also budgeted $12,000 for the Lucas Farms neighborhood signs and $8,000 for the airport mural. And starting at the top, we know where the Blackhawk one is. That's hopefully coming to fruition. South District neighborhood art is going to take until next spring to complete. The Lucas Farms neighborhood signs, that was the one with the interesting concept that was presented a few months ago, and we asked that those concepts be vetted with the neighborhood, and we haven't heard back from that group yet. So I'm not sure where that project is. But I've asked for those funds to be carried over as well. And then the airport mural, that one was delayed because of the replacement of those big airport doors. So that gives you an idea of the number of projects in a $50,000 budget and sort of how difficult it is to wrap it all up in a year, which I guess begs the question from a staff side, and I feel like I'm still in a honeymoon period, of suggesting perhaps that instead of 4 projects that are between $5,000 and $8,000, or even more projects than that, perhaps it's worth considering going with a larger project or perhaps 2 larger projects as well. Now, I think we're committed to the sculpture showcase and keeping that program going. You might want to think about whether that's something you think we need to increase the number of pads again, or not, or go with 8 for another year or so. You might also want to think about whether or not we do 1-year exhibits on those sculpture pads, or we ask for a 2-year display of those, paying the artist more, of course, but reducing the administration of the program significantly. And then matching grants are another relatively small item. The matching grants do check a lot of boxes, as you'll note in the graphs. People ask for community participation, art, art in unexpected places, different kinds of things like dance, et cetera. And our matching grants program actually does fulfill a lot of those kinds of needs that were expressed by the community in those surveys I showed. So I knew this wasn't going to provide any great illumination for you, but I wanted to share the volume, where we are, what we have, where it is, and just sort of get you thinking about the budget and discussing that making that really kind of be our key discussion point next month. And let me add this, if there's any other information that you think would be helpful, I would be happy to get that in the packet for you for next month as well. Anything that would help with the budget.
I just want to say I appreciate the breaking down of murals in this town and what the city has put its funding towards, or city-owned versus privately owned or privately commissioned murals. I have thoughts on that. I'll wait until next month, but I found that very amusing and very helpful.
I wanted to, thanks for that. I also wanted to show you the map that our intern did. I really did find it helpful. Let's see, oh, here it is.
And this is all Anna
Yeah, Anna
Klauser. Yeah.
Yes, thanks. This is it, and each of those little dots represent the art that is listed on the side. And when you click on one of them, she put in all the information that we have about it, when it was, who is the artist, a little bit about it, that kind of thing. But besides that, I think it really helps see, where the concentration of public art is, and maybe even more so where public art is not. So we can definitely use this map in our discussions next month, because I think it will, it's really easy to think, oh yeah, that public art is there, but when you really kind of back out to 50,000 feet, it's kind of illustrative here. And if you get a chance in the meantime, it's just at icgov.org/publicart. So it's one of the first things to find there. So I sort of made that a long intro into what else would be helpful for a budget discussion next month.
You mentioned the administrative cost of the sculpture program, and so I don't know what that is.
It's really as much the time as anything. So everything from putting out the request for submissions that we got, and then getting a contract for each of those artists ready to go, tracking down the artists, getting the signatures returned, and then coordinating installation. In this case, we'll have uninstallation or deinstallation at the same time. Checks made out to each of those artists for installation and deinstallation. And maybe that's about it. Even for 8 sculpture pads, there's a lot of handling in there, and I'm discovering that it's a lot different working with artists than it is working with developers in the community.
So didn't you throw out like a conversation you had with Marcia about this, and you were like, Marcia, how much time are you spending on public art related administration? Mm-hmm. And I thought you had said that she, by the time she retired, it was 30 hours a week, or it was like 75% of her time, or something. I mean, it was
75% of her time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then versus, I know obviously it's like a very different thing where you've been doing this a couple of years, getting ready to take it on, but then you're also like the newbie kind of,
Mm-hmm.
city staff person on it.
Yeah. And I think she grew it because, she was doing the things that seemed to make sense with a tiny budget. It had been even smaller for a few years. So maybe that's a product of having that small budget, but wanting to tick all those boxes that people want to see in public art. So I'm certainly not saying that was the wrong way to do it. I'm suggesting we maybe be a little more efficient with how we spend public art money, especially given staff allocation and, all the things.
I was going to say, I sent these links to Steve and Wendy, partially because I can never remember what violates open meeting laws via email. So that's my MO, is just to send them to Steve and Wendy. But is thinking about transitioning these kind of individual one-off neighborhood projects into a more streamlined bus stop art project that then can rotate different neighborhood associations. And there are a ton of examples from everything, but these are transparency requirements for window clings that go on bus shelters, and here's what you need to tell the printer to meet those very streamlined requirements already established according to ADA and public safety standards. So I do think that's one thing that I would like to put on the table for people to think about.
Yeah, and I
then,
can share that link in the packet as well, and thank you for sending that too. I didn't forward it yet because I wanted to get some costs from some of these cities that are already doing this, and it's a great idea, I think.
Well, yeah, and also to just piggyback off of transportation that is already identifying these sites as meaningful points in neighborhoods that see traffic, or yeah. The other thing to think about, even just thinking about not to stifle or curtail artists' work, but perhaps identifying the easiest or most thinking of Dawson's sign. If you're interested in a two-dimensional public art project, we recommend this type of sign. Just kind of having maybe a ladder of potential avenues that are pre-approved. We know relatively what they cost. So it's not each time trying to figure out how do we actualize or realize this individual work.
Design standards for each of those types of categories of projects even. Would be nice.
I think that's really important. Those are really good points and helpful to an artist, and encouraging for somebody to step out of their comfort zone, but to have some kind of knowledge or pre-existing information before they work on proposals.
I do think it's an interesting point that you've brought up, that what we're doing based on having a low budget or a very small budget to having a small budget to still having a small in terms of other commissions and committee budgets. 50,000 is still quite small, but of having it grow over time, does that mean then that some of our methods do need to be thought through differently? And it could be an interesting exercise to figure out, well, then how do you, how can you think of general budget buckets, again, do we have a themed sort of project like the bus stops? Or do we say we're going to commit, instead of having, multiple rounds of the matching grant funds, do we do one, and we think about increasing the budget for those so it's fewer, but then the ones that are chosen do get more money? I don't know, is it committing to, we're going to go big this year, or what have you, but to just have some of those general, what are going to be our habits or our themes or our vibe, whatever we want to call it, for, thinking, maybe in a 3 to 5 year kind of realm. I don't know. But I think it's a really great conversation, and having that added, the administration of this is quite intense for the amount of money and what has to happen. I don't know. So thank you for sharing your perspective on that, because it's a very different way of putting through information that I think, I've thought about before, but having a very different perspective on that.
Good.
And also you were mentioning about more pads for the sculpture showcase, and that there's 8, and how many submissions is the norm for that?
Well, we've only had it for, this is only our second year. And I forgot that up, actually. Oh, I closed it.
About 14 or 15.
We had about 14 or 15 this time, and I think it was about the same last time. Yeah.
Usually multiple submissions by individual artists.
So 8 seems good for now.
Yeah,
You know.
that's
I would agree.
I'm a fan of conservative growth.
There's the list right there.
I think that's like, as the submissions go up, the pads would go up. So it seems pretty relational at this point.
I do think it would be interesting giving it another couple of years on the 8 pad to just see if there does, if we do get more diversity in the artists who are applying. So it's not, one artist with 4 submissions, but maybe it's like, oh, there's a new name in there, or to just see how that might develop.
Are there specific, because budgeting is next meeting, so are there specific questions you want us to have answers to as we walk into next meeting? In terms of?
Yeah, no.
So do you want to, okay.
Yeah. But I think it all comes down to the same kind of thing. We have 2 or 3 buckets,
Yeah.
and one of the buckets is the sculpture showcase now. Another bucket has been matching funds. Do we want to keep funding that bucket? And then for large projects, I just call them large projects because they're larger than the other ones. How do you want to divide that up?
Okay.
And, you might say, okay, well, one large project could be starting a bus stop panel art program, like Dominic had shared, and I can send those links to everybody as well. In which case, one panel, at least of the glass or plexiglass variety, is about a $2,000 expense. And if you require 3 panels, then clearly that's going to be more.
That would just be like one wall, one side.
No, one panel, or one wall might have 3 or 4 panels,
Okay.
depending on how big your bus stop is.
Sure, and then if you want, walls, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I guess think of the buckets.
With streamlining in mind.
Right. But I also love picturing Wendy with like a big bucket and then these tiny little buckets, just all these little tiny buckets
Thimbles.
in her other hand.
What else would be helpful for me, for you, for that?
I think what you've done is very helpful, so.
The thing that I would maybe want to see with a little bit more detail, thinking of what has sort of been a big project that we've taken on, and that in my time on the committee has been the Oracles mural. And so looking at, looking at the particular expenses on that, or has everything fit into that $30,000 allotment? Or-
Yeah, the mural was 42.
Okay.
12,000 of that came from the university,
Okay,
30 from
right.
us. And then there was an additional 3,800 spent on the wraps. They just put on the posts that do more explaining.
Because
It's done.
okay. Because I think that's a really good sort of maybe project to think through in terms of like a big project and what maybe a big project might be for us.
Yeah.
And just what are all those elements that went into that if we were to take on something like that over time, what would that, I guess, need to entail, I guess.
show up with my money hat on.
What would your money hat look like?
I know, I'm intrigued.
Well, if anything comes to mind, that would be helpful. Let me know. I'll bring it along. I will share the links that Dominic sent. And anything else. Okay.
Staff updates, perhaps?
I don't really have anything else to add. The only thing I would have talked about would have been the Lucas Farms neighborhood signs, but I haven't heard anything, so.
I did know, you mentioned it, the oracles, the wraps are on those posts. Now, were we supposed to see something from them before they installed those?
We did. Is there something wrong with them?
We did? I guess, did we see that as a committee?
Oh,
Or
we,
was
the
that just a
committee,
staff
sorry.
review?
Oh.
I don't know, I haven't stopped and looked at them, so I don't,
Yeah.
yeah,
They shared them with Marcia and I,
okay,
and we said, okay.
okay. Just curious. I haven't looked at them. I noticed that they were up, and I was like, oh, wow, they're up.
Maybe I should go back and look at the minutes and see if we were supposed to share that with
No,
everybody.
yeah, that's fine. So-
And the concrete structures in at Kiwanis Park for the round bench area, the Cortina isn't, the metal isn't there, but the structure's there in the park, so.
Yeah, and the metal part is laser cut with the images that are going to be in it, but they're waiting to have it rolled so that it wraps nicely around that round bench. So.
All right, number 10, anybody want to get that going?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
I-
Aye.